Give me the Bible, star of gladness gleaming, to cheer the wanderer lone and tempest-tossed. No storms can hide that radiance peaceful beaming, since Jesus came to seek and save the lost. Give me the Bible, holy message shining, thy light shall guide me in the narrow way. Precept and promise, law and love combining, till night shall vanish in eternal day. Give me the Bible when my heart is broken, when sin and grief have filled my soul with fear. Give me the precious words by Jesus spoken. Hold up faith's lamp to show my Savior near. Give me the Bible, holy message shining, thy light shall guide me in the narrow way. Precept and promise, law and love combining, till night shall vanish in eternal day. Give me the Bible, all my steps enlighten, teach me the dangers of these realms below. That lamp of safety o'er the gloom shall brighten, that light alone the path of peace can show. Give me the Bible, holy message shining, thy light shall guide me in the narrow way. Precept and promise, law and love combining, till night shall vanish in eternal day. Give me the Bible, lamp of life immortal, hold up that splendor by the open grave. Show me the light from heaven's shining portals, show me the glory gilding Jordan's wave. Give me the Bible, holy message shining, thy light shall guide me in the narrow way. Precept and promise, law and love combining, till night shall vanish in eternal day. Break thou the bread of life, dear Lord, to me, as thou didst break the loaves beside the sea. Beyond the sacred page, I seek thee, Lord. My spirit pants for thee, O living word. Bless thou the truth, dear Lord, to me, as thou didst bless the bread by Galilee. Then shall all bondage cease, all fetters fall, and I shall find my peace, my all in all.
Hey, everybody, long time no see. It has been a good while since we've had this study, and I do apologize for that, but it's been a busy summer for me. We've got a few people on. Kat says hello. Hello, Kat. Good to have you with us. Russell says, hey, brother CJ. CJ's here in the background. He was doing some weird stuff leading up to the end of the countdown there. I won't describe it, but it was weird. He was doing all kinds of strange stuff. You know, CJ, you know how he is. How is everybody this fine Monday afternoon? Speaking of CJ, you can see him wrong way. You can see him here behind me here. He's doing his little, what he calls his little duck lips thing. If you notice, he's talking, he's got a hand up like this. He's teaching a class, but he's like this. Like he's blowing a kiss or something. I put that poster up there. This is one of our classrooms here at the Mount Morris Church building. And CJ said, gosh, if all the one, I didn't even realize it. I thought it was a good picture, but there's other ones that CJ would have rather me used, but we're probably due for some new pictures up here. You were imitating me? Is that what you were doing? I don't know what you were doing, but I've never done that stuff before. Trying to crack your neck or something? Is that what it was? Yeah, the timer's counting down, and I look in the little window, and CJ's going like that. Goodness gracious. What's the little motto, CJ, for Christian edification ministry? Something about shenanigans or something? Edifying Christians with professionalism and shenanigans. There we go. That's a pretty neat motto there, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know if motto is the right word, but nice little professional statement there. We have been going in this study, going through the book of Revelation, and we're getting pretty close to the end here. We're going to go over 2 chapters today. Let me check really quick and see how many more we have in this study, how many more lessons, because it's like 4 or 3. It's like 3 or 4 more, I think, after today. At least if I stick to the plan that I have. Let's see. I just looked at this today, but I forgot. Okay, so there's like 4 more. We're going to, if the Lord wills, get through chapters 17 and 18 and get into the first 5 verses of chapter 19 today. And then we'll cover the rest of 19, and we'll do chapter 20, chapter 21, and chapter 22. So we're picking up the pace a little bit today. And the reason for that is because these chapters kind of go together. What you'll find is that chapter 17 kind of sets the tone for chapter 18 into chapter 19. Reba's here. Hi, Reba. Good to have you with us. Yeah, it's been 3 weeks, I think. I was planning on doing this class on July 3rd, that Monday, but I just ran out of time. Busy day with the holiday coming up afterward, and then the last 2 weeks I've been pretty swamped. So we are able to be together today, though, and it's good to be with you once again. This is the study to show ourselves approved, and without much further, I think we'll go ahead and get into our study. So we have been going through the book of Revelation, and this is our 18th lesson already, which is kind of wild that it's been this long. And like I said, we're going to go through a couple chapters this afternoon. Before we read the chapters, I want to just touch a little bit on what we've seen the last few chapters, because some of that is at work in what we see coming into chapter 17. So we have been seeing the culmination of God's wrath starting to take shape here as we get to the end of the book of Revelation. And specifically what we're seeing is we're witnessing the fall of the great city, which is called Babylon. And we're going to see Babylon in chapter 17, the city that is symbolically called Babylon. And it's already been mentioned a couple times. If you remember, this is from Revelation chapter 14 and verse 8. Fallen is Babylon the Great, she who made all nations drink the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. So you see this idea here of Babylon the Great having fallen in chapter 14. Babylon comes up again in chapter 16 and verse 19. This time it says the great city was split into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell, and God remembered Babylon the Great to make fury of his wrath. That was the last chapter we looked at, which, that's been 3 weeks ago or more. So what we've been seeing taking shape is sort of the culmination of God's wrath, and we're going to see Babylon crash here in this section we're going to go over today. So with that in mind, we'll go ahead and we'll read chapter 17 first, and we'll go through chapter 17, and then we'll read chapter 18 and we'll go through that, and then we'll go through the first 5 verses of chapter 19. So let's go ahead and let's read Revelation 17. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls, remember the 7 bowls of wrath, that was chapter 16. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk." And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. When I saw her, I marveled greatly. But the angel said to me, "Why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the dwellers on earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come." This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. They are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen. One is, the other has not yet come. And when he does come, he must remain only a little while. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour together with the beast. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called and chosen and faithful. And the angel said to me, "The waters that you saw, Where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. And the 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put into their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind and handing over the royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. Okay, so we've read that from chapter 17. And we see here initially that John, because remember, John is the one who's seeing all of this. So, oh, I glitched out for a second. So he's there with one of the 7 angels. And this is different than what we're accustomed to. Apparently I did freeze, huh? It just glitched out on this part, but CJ said you froze. Well, John isn't usually accompanied in his visions. It happens sometimes, but it's not typical. He kind of taken by the hand and gone through these visions, although it has happened before. And it's interesting because this is one of the angels who had the 7 bowls. Well, that looks back at chapter 16. In chapter 16, we see those 7 bowls of wrath being poured out. Well, this, hang on. This links not only the events previously from chapter 16, it's also linking with a contrasting vision that's going to happen in chapter 21. Chapter 21 is a pretty familiar chapter to us. It's after, the battle in heaven or whatever. Chapter 21 is the depiction, the beginning of the depiction of heaven. And there's one of these angels also there with John. And these are 2 obviously contrasting visions. One is of Babylon the Great and with the beast, and the other one is of heaven. Obviously 2 different things. So we see kind of an interesting thing here with this angel. And the angel wants to show something to John. And what the angel says is, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters. The image of a prostitute is a fitting one, I think, for what they're talking about here, because it goes on to say that the kings of earth have committed sexual immorality with this prostitute. When you think about what a prostitute is, or you could use the word harlot, as some versions do, some versions of the Bible. This is someone, you think of a typical prostitute who walks the streets, and what they're doing is they're looking for someone to have someone commit sexual immorality with them. And so they're on the prowl looking for people to commit sexual immorality with them. And this is what this prostitute is doing, as we see in Revelation. And it's interesting because this sexual immorality, you can kind of see some of the undertones of this. It seems to be talking about idolatry against God. You could say that idolatry is like adultery against God, and it's described in this way in the prophecy of Hosea, for example, where Hosea literally marries a woman of harlotry as sort of an object lesson about what God has done with Israel. And the prophecy of Hosea is a really extraordinary thing that we see. We see also here that it's with the wine of this prostitute's sexual immorality that the dwellers of the earth have become drunk, meaning they not only consume this woman's sexual immorality, but they're intoxicated with it. It's enough to not just consume it, but to consume enough of it to intoxicate yourself. And so the image here is strong of the involvement of the earth with the sexual immorality of this woman. The 2 are linked closely together here. And so then John sees the prostitute, and who it is it's a woman who is sitting on a scarlet beast, and that beast is full of blasphemous names. And And we see also about this beast that it has 7 heads and 10 horns. Hi, Teresa. Good to have you with us. We're in Revelation 17. So this beast in chapter 17 has 7 heads and 10 horns. If you look, there might even be a footnote here. Let's see. I bet you there is a footnote. The ESV is good about that. Let's see. Sitting on a scarlet beast. This is chapter 12 that we're looking at here. So this is chapter 12 and verse 3. Scarlet, same thing, with 7 heads and 10 horns. And this one has on its heads 7 diadems. So this is going back to the beast that we first see in chapter 12 and has come up again and again. So this is probably the same beast. You could pretty well infer, I think. So getting back to this should sound familiar because it's probably the same beast as before. We also see this woman is in purple and scarlet and all kinds of jewelry. Scarlet was, purple first. Purple was a very rich kind of color for people to wear back then. It was a luxurious color. It's associated often with royalty. And scarlet, same thing. And she has all of this jewelry on. So what we're saying is this woman is adorning herself in a very pompous kind of a way. And it's interesting also that we see that this woman has a name of mystery on her forehead. And that name is Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. So we see again this imagery of Babylon taking shape here in what we're seeing. Babylon is used symbolically here because, Babylon was destroyed. The actual Babylonian empire was destroyed long ago. The Persians came in and overtook them. But Babylon's used here symbolically to refer to the nations of the earth, it seems like, the empires of the world, which stand in contrast to the kingdom of God, the kingdoms of the earth and the kingdom of God. So you have the beast here who, previously is identified as Satan, the serpent who deceived Eve in an earlier chapter. Now we have this prostitute who is symbolic of the nations of the earth. And so, like I just said, this prostitute represents the empires of the world through Babylon. And so you have this dynamic here. Something that's common with John, our writer here, is the dualism that you see going on where you have two sides kind of at odds with each other. You see it in his gospel account. You see it in his letters. You see especially the dualism of darkness and light. Darkness and light go against each other. Well, here you see a similar sort of dynamic with the kingdoms of earth versus the kingdom of God. And it's interesting here because the empires of the world are represented through Babylon as this prostitute. And prostitutes have pimps. And the pimp of this prostitute is the devil. The devil is the one who is orchestrating the shots here, the one who is telling this prostitute what to do. And I've mentioned it already, but I'll mention it again. Prostitutes or harlots are a common symbol in the Bible of idolatry among nations, because idolatry is like committing sexual immorality against God in that sense, in terms of the covenant that the Jewish people have with God. Connection with Ephesians 2:2 with the imagery here, the prince of the power of the air, perhaps. You could say that, I think. That's not too big of a stretch. So a few examples here of prostitutes being used as an image. You see this in particular in the Old Testament. We talked about Israel with Hosea already. Another example is in Isaiah with Tyre and Isaiah. And you see it in Nahum also with Nineveh. So let's look at Isaiah 23. Let me pull that up. Isaiah 23 and verse 15. Sorry if anyone gets whiplash from my quick scrolling. And that day, Tyre will be forgotten for 70 years, like the days of one king. At the end of 70 years, it will happen to Tyre as in the song of the prostitute. Take a harp, go about the city, O forgotten prostitute. Make sweet melodies, sing many songs, that you may be remembered. At the end of 70 years, the Lord will visit Tyre, and she will return to her wages and will prostitute herself with all the kingdoms of the world on the face of the earth. And then it continues further. Another example is in the prophecy of Nahum, in Nahum chapter 3. This is talking about Nineveh. And all for the countless whorings of the prostitute, graceful and of deadly charms, who betrays nations with her whorings, the peoples with her charms. Behold, I am against you, declares the Lord of hosts, and will lift up your skirts over your face, and I will make nations look at your nakedness and kingdoms at your shame. So just a couple examples here of, sort of the same thing we're seeing here with this prostitute. Being likened to idolatry. And you see that taking shape with the nations here of the earth. And a really good example of this also is Proverbs 7. If you look at Proverbs 7, hang on. There's an image here. If you go down a few verses, let's see. For at the window of my house I have looked out through my lattice, and I have seen among the simple, I have perceived among the youths a young man lacking sense, passing along the street near her corner, taking the road to her house, in the twilight, in the evening, at the time of night and darkness. And behold, the woman meets him dressed as a prostitute, wily of heart. She is loud and wayward. Her feet do not stay at home. Now in the street, now in the market, and at every corner she lies in wait. She goes on. Well, the proverb goes on. The woman tries to seduce the young man. And verse 21 here, with much seductive speech, she persuades him. With her smooth talk, she compels him. All at once he follows her as an ox goes to the slaughter, or as a stag is caught fast, till an arrow pierces its liver. As a bird rushes into a snare, he does not know that it will cost him his life. So we see here a few images of the destructiveness that these prostitutes, the idolatry brings. Of course, we know idolatry is ultimately what led to the exile of the Jewish people when Babylon, ironically, came and took them. Now, this chapter, there's a lot going on, and there's some things to connect with the Roman Empire and so on and so forth. I'm not going to make those connections because I'm trying, and I've been consistent with this through this study, thinking along the big picture of things. So big picture, here's what's happening in this chapter, in particular with the prostitute and with the dragon. The prostitute is seducing the earth dwellers. That's what prostitutes do. They seduce people in order to try to get them to commit sexual immorality with them. That's true of real life prostitutes. It's also true, we just read from Proverbs 7 of that prostitute. The prostitute promises pleasure and wealth like the world promises us. But what she delivers are abominations and impurity. An abomination is something that strictly goes against God's will, something that God detests. And there are some things in the Bible that are called abominations. And then you have impurity, something that's been defiled. So these are what she delivers, abominations and impurity. We see that she corrupts the earth dwellers with that impurity, with idolatry and with immorality. And we see also in here that she rages war against the Lamb. So there's a dynamic here. One of the dynamics you see throughout the book of Revelation is the dynamic of good versus evil. You see that throughout most, if not all, of the book. And this verse is, some say, the climax of the book of Revelation. This is verse 14 here. They will wage war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is the Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called and chosen and faithful. So some regard this as the climax of the book. I would say that chapter 20 probably is the climax of it, but we'll get to that eventually. So this is some of the things that happens in and the heads and so on, and you can make connections to various kings with that. That's been done a lot already, so I'm not gonna, and that, frankly, I think that takes too much time. So I'm gonna skip some of that, and we're gonna get into chapter 18 now. So let's come back here to our passage. Let's see, where'd my mouse go? There we go. So we go down now to chapter 18. Let's see, there we go. After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was made bright with his glory. And he called out with a mighty voice, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place for demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable beast. For all nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. And the kings of the earth have committed immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of her luxurious living." Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues, for her sins are heaped high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Pay her back as she herself has paid back others, and repay her double for her deeds. Mix a double portion for her in the cup she mixed. As she glorified herself and lived in luxury, so give her a like measure of torment and mourning. Since in her heart she says, I sit as a queen, I am no widow, and mourning I shall never see. For this reason her plagues will come in a single day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be burned up with fire, for mighty is the Lord who has judged her. And the kings of the earth who committed sexual immorality and lived in luxury with her will weep and wail over her when they see the smoke of her burning. They will stand far off in fear of her torment and say, Alas, alas, you great city, you mighty city Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment has come. And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn for her, since no one buys their cargo anymore. Cargo of gold, silver, jewels, pearls, fine linen, purple cloth, silk, scarlet cloth, all kinds of scented wood, all kinds of articles of ivory, all kinds of articles of costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble, cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, cattle, and sheep, horses and chariots, and slaves, that is, human souls. The fruit for which your soul longed has gone from you, and all your delicacies and your splendors are lost to you, never to be found again. The merchants of these wares who gained wealth from her will stand far off in fear of her torment, weeping and mourning aloud. Alas, alas, for the great city that was clothed in fine linen, in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, with jewel, and with pearls. For in a single hour all this wealth has been laid waste. And all shipmasters and seafaring men, sailors, and all whose trade is on the sea, stood far off and cried out as they saw the smoke of her burning. What city was like the great city. And they threw dust on their heads as they wept and mourned, crying out, Alas, alas, for the great city, where all who had ships at sea grew rich by her wealth. For in a single hour she has been laid waste. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you, saints and apostles and prophets, for God has given judgment for you against her. Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, So will Babylon, the great city, be thrown down with violence, and will be found no more. And the sound of harpists and musicians, of flute players and trumpeters, will be heard in you no more. And a craftsman of any craft will be found in you no more. And the sound of the mill will be heard in you no more. And the light of a lamp will shine in you no more. And the voice of the great ones of the earth and all nations were deceived by your sorcery. And in her was found the blood of the prophets and saints, and of all who have been slain on earth. Someone commented something while I was reading. Let's see. So, verse 8, does that mean the devil is in hell? I'm guessing that means from chapter 17. Let's look at that. Sorry for the whiplash. Let's see. In verse 8, the beast that you saw was and is not and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. I don't think the devil is in hell right now, but we know that that is eventually his fate, and we'll get to that in chapter 20 when he's thrown into the lake of fire. I think that's chapter 20. I think this is sort of alluding to that when that happens. He's going to rise from the bottomless pit, which we already read about. And there's a footnote there. It just means abyss, I think. Yeah. And he'll go. Sorry, hang on. And he'll go to destruction. This is a nation. Who are you talking about, CJ? Are you talking about this in verse 8 of 17? You're in chapter 18. Okay. Well, here, let's get to chapter 18. Let's see.
Sorry, yeah, I was talking about chapter 17, doesn't it say in the, well, he's been talking about the beast in connection to a great city in chapter 17. I mean,
that's the prostitute, isn't it?
yes, the prostitute is on the beast, and was given authority. Yeah, I thought I had something there, but
well, there's these
the one is the great city, verse 18.
Yeah. Maybe you're thinking of the horns that are on the beast, because those represent kings and things.
Yeah.
The 7 heads or 7 mountains. There are the 7 kings. And that's the stuff I said I wasn't going to get into, because there's connections to make with Rome and so on with that. But
so maybe the beast, like, I don't think the beast has to represent the devil himself. I think as you look at the 7 horns, the beast represents kingdoms, that are under the influence of the devil. But there were many times that the devil was defeated, and at the cross he suffered a great blow, and so this is another chapter where there's a big blow to Satan, and John says the beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. I think that was true then, and it's true now. The devil's time is short. It doesn't say he went to hell. He says he rose from the pit and is about to go there. In verse 8, sorry.
That's okay, CJ. I'm trying to find the beast is identified as the devil at some point. I don't remember where specifically, what chapter or what verse, but or maybe it's the dragon I'm thinking of. Anyway,
Revelation 12. The dragon is identified as the serpent in connection to the devil and Satan in verse 9.
okay. All right, let's get through chapter 18 here. There's some good stuff in this chapter also. So let me get back on here. In this chapter, we see a few different things. We see first the declaration of the fall of Babylon, which is funny because it's already been talked about before. We looked at a verse in chapter 14. We looked in chapter 16. Again, we see it here in chapter 18. This Sunkist is making me burp. I got an orange pop because I got an orange shirt on. So we see first the declaration of the fall of Babylon. This seems more final, though, than some of the other ones because we see reactions in this chapter from the lovers of that city, and there's various groups of people, and we'll talk about those groups of people. Thirdly, we'll see another decree from another angel, and within these different things, we'll see some common threads, and we'll point some of those out as we go through this. So in the first 8 verses, we see the declaration of the fall of Babylon. And it's an angel who comes and makes this decree, and it's one who has great authority. Notice how this angel is described. Has great authority. The earth is made bright with his glory. So the angel isn't specifically named, but we know that this is an angel that has a great deal of authority because that's what the Bible tells us. So this angel comes and makes this declaration about the fall of Babylon. And it's interesting because within this decree, not only do we have the news of the fall of Babylon, but we also have here an indictment of her, thinking of the city as the prostitute from the previous chapter, and also an indictment of those who have pledged allegiance to her. And we've seen, these types throughout these last few chapters. There's those who have the mark of the beast, right? The ones who worship the beast. And so we see an indictment of the woman in verse 2. It says she has become a dwelling place for demons. Christians were a dwelling place for God's Spirit within us, right? Paul says as much. We're a temple of the Holy Spirit. Well, these people are a temple for demons. That's something you don't want to be. Well, that's what this woman is. And then we see also an indictment of the nations in verse 3 who have drunk the wine of passion of her sexual immorality. And we saw that a little bit in chapter 17. They were drunk off of the wine of her sexual immorality. So they've consumed it enough to become intoxicated with it. And so you see how this really is a bad thing that's happened with these nations. And you see now this is an indictment not just of the woman, but now it's an indictment on those who've participated in these things with the woman. With this decree, it's interesting. There's also a call to the saints from another angel, and that call is in verse 4, where the angel says, "Come out of her, my people." In other words, if God's people are dabbing with this woman, we need to get out while we can. We need to get out of that. And so the objective is to not take part of her sins, because if you do that, then eventually you're going to share in her plagues. And we see that also in verse 4. We see in verse 5 also that her sins are heaped high as heaven. And so this is something that God's people shouldn't be part of. This is something that is going to be quite destructive, and this is going to be paid back for the things that she's done. And we see that in verse 6. She's going to be paid back, and even paid back double. If you look here, pay her back as she herself has paid back others, and repay her double for her deeds. Now, if you've been doing good stuff, then getting paid double is a good thing. But if you've been engaging in this sexual immorality with this woman, then that is, of course, a bad thing, because you're going to get double what you've done. And that's what we... It's interesting also when you see the woman as she's described. She would say of herself things like, "I sit as a queen. I am no widow, and mourning I shall never see." We saw in the last chapter how she adorned herself with the purple and with the scarlet and with the jewels. So she adorned herself in a pompous way. Now we see that she acted also in a pompous way. I'm better than anything else that is out there, that kind of thing. Well, of course, this woman is in for a rude awakening. And then we have this declaration from the angel, and the declaration is that her plagues will come in a single day. And so it's interesting because this woman is so confident, and yet she's going to be wiped away so quickly. Those plagues will come within just a single day. And so we see that this is going to happen very quickly, despite the confidence that this woman has. Then we move into verses 9 and 10, and we start to see some of the reactions of those who have been participating in these things with this woman. The first one we see is the reaction of the kings of the earth, and they have committed sexual immorality and lived in luxury with her. And those two going together are important. You have the sexual immorality, but you also have the living in luxury. Those two things are important to mention. So you look here in verses 9 and 10, and it starts by saying, "This is the kings of the earth. They've committed sexual immorality. They've lived in luxury with her. They will weep and wail over her when they see the smoke of her burning." So they're going to weep and wail over her. They are lamenting this woman. Well, one wonders if only they could have had that same sort of sorrow for the woman, for their own sins. If that were the case, then you would see a big drastic change in these people, but they're wrapped up with the woman. They're wrapped up in this sexual immorality and so on. We also see that they'll stand far off because of their fear. And that's very telling. They fear what's going to happen, yet they don't use that fear as motivation to change. And so we see here in verse 10, they will stand far off in fear of her torment, and they'll say, "Alas, alas." That's the same word that Jesus uses in Matthew 23 when he's talking about the scribes and Pharisees. It's translated there as woe. Well, this is the same word. "Alas, alas, you great city, you mighty city Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment has come." This word that's translated alas, it is the opposite of a blessing. So like in the Beatitudes in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus says things like, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, That word blessed is the Greek word, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it means to be happy. So a blessing is something to be happy about. If you're saying alas something or woe to somebody, you're saying you have a reason to be upset. You have a reason to be sad. There's something that is bad that's going on here. And we see in Matthew 23, when Jesus does that to the scribes and Pharisees, he's indicting them of their hypocrisy. Well, here we see this for Babylon because judgment has come, and that's obviously a bad thing for that city. So they are going to stand off because of their fear, and they have a lot to be fearful of because what's happening to the city is going to also happen to them. And they, of course, go on to say, for in a single hour, your judgment has come. It happens fast, right? And that's, Jesus tells us we need to be ready tonight. And so we need to be ready because that judgment, it's going to be quick. Then starting in verse 11, so that's the reaction of the kings. Now we see the reaction of the merchants. These are people who participate in some of the, what would you call in the economy, right? These are the people who are buying and selling things. We see in verse 11 that they also weep and mourn for this woman with her fall. You wonder why. The kings, you could see it's because they were attached to her, because they were living this life of luxury with her. Well, why then would the merchants be upset? Well, it's because the merchants benefited greatly from this woman. No one is going to be there now to buy their cargo any longer. And so you see that starting in verse 11. They weep and mourn for her since no one buys their cargo anymore. And then it goes on through the list of the cargo. And you see some of the things mentioned here. Jewels, pearls, fine linen, purple cloth. You go on down. These are luxurious things that are listed here. Cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh. These are, pricey things that are mentioned. And so it's interesting. You read through the list, and the last thing that's mentioned are human souls. We see human souls are at stake here that these merchants were using for transactions. It refers to them as slaves, but these are human souls that are being bought and sold in this way. We see also from these merchants that their wealth is from the prostitute. You go down, I'll show you here in verse 13. This is among the list of the goods, and slaves, that is human souls. And there's a footnote there for an alternate translation. Then you go down to verse 15. The merchants of these wares who gained wealth from her will stand far off in fear for torment, weeping and mourning aloud. And so we see that they've gained some wealth from her also. They may not be living quite the luxurious life of those kings that we saw before, but we see that they have gotten very wealthy off of this prostitute. And we see also that they too are going to stand far off because of their fear. They see what happens to the prostitute, and they realize that they're in for it next. And that's obviously a great thing to be fearful of for them. Then we continue with some of these reactions. Another one we see is the reaction of the shipmasters. These are people described at the end of verse 17. Shipmasters, seafaring men, sailors all whose trade is on the sea. And so this is the reaction of those people. And they cry out, what city was like the great city? They offer this praise over this city. And it's ironic because this is the city that's going to fall and is going to crumble. And yet they say, well, what city was like the great city? They've grown attached to it. They have become dependent on it. And so they also mourn for the great city that has fallen. And notice, you see this in connection with some of the other things, that greed is one of the things that stands out. You see it with the kings. They lived a luxurious life. You see it with the merchants. They became wealthy. And you see it also here with the shipmasters. And you see it in verse 19 where it says, alas, alas. That's that same word. Woe, the same word that Jesus uses in Matthew 23. Alas, alas, for the great city where all who had ships at sea grew rich by her wealth. So there's a little bit of sharing in the wealth here from this prostitute, from this great city. The people who are participating in these things, they have incentive to do so because they're monetarily benefiting from it. And you see that with the mark of the beast. Those who don't have the mark don't participate in the economy. Well, you see that here taking shape with these that are mourning the loss of this. And so they cry out, what city was great like this city? And they say here, alas, alas, for the great city where all who had ships at sea grew rich by her wealth. For in a single hour she has been laid waste. You see that mentioned again. It's happened so quickly, this judgment that has come. So you see these various reactions. Well, what are some common threads that you see in these reactions? Some things that I notice is, and I already talked about it, greed is a big factor here. The love of money is a root of, but it's the love of money. And these people obviously have a great love for money. And when you look at a lot of the problems going on in our society today, much of it can be attributed to following the money trail. I was talking with some people this last week about the movie. I don't know if any of you have had a chance to see it, The Sound of Freedom. It's a movie that follows some of the sex trafficking things that go on in our nation and in our world. It was actually CG's grandparents that I went and saw it with. And you just follow the money, and that's why this is allowed to happen, because it's such a moneymaker for so many people. And again, that love of money is what drives that business, on top of the sexual immorality and on top of various other things, thinking of that example. But you see this taking shape in so many different things. You see the corruption in our government that comes primarily, I think, from a position of greed. Politicians being bought off by lobbyists, so on and so forth. You see it with what has been called some of the woke things in our culture, the growing influence in movies and so on. It's because there's paid interest in that. And so you follow the money trail, and it always gets back to who's dishing out the most money, right? The love of money is a root for all evil. You see that taking shape. And that's what I think is taking shape here with these reactions primarily. There's other things, like the kings also were engaged in some of the sexual immorality with the woman, with the prostitute. But, there's other things taking shape as well. But it seems like greed and the love of money is sort of the primary thing going on here. And for these people, they're letting the love of money get in the way of their salvation. And, Jesus talks about laying up treasures not on earth, but laying up treasures in heaven. Well, these people obviously have laid up their treasures on earth. Well, when judgment comes, those treasures aren't going to do you any good. And we're seeing them learning that reality, it seems like, before our eyes in this chapter. I'm running out of time, so I better keep going. We see also in verses 21 through 24 another declaration from the angel. Let me see what CJ said real quick. Isn't it interesting how they react to the judgment of this city? They're not mourning over the city's sins, of their sins, but mourning over the loss of their prophet. That's right. How many times do you and I mourn, not because of our sins, but because we lose our ability to participate in their wickedness? Challenging thoughts for us. That's a good thought, CJ. Thanks for that. They're mourning over their loss of prophets. So we see another declaration from the angel, from an angel here. And in this, there is an object lesson with the throwing of a millstone into the sea. Well, You throw a millstone into the sea, it's going to sink to the bottom, and whatever's attached to it, it's going to drown. Well, that same fate is going to happen to Babylon. And eventually, this great city is going to be quiet. Makes me think of the opening scenes of the book of Lamentations, where Jeremiah presumably is talking about this great city, Jerusalem. It's been taken captive. They've been exiled. And now this once great city that was so full of people is now empty. Well, that's going to happen also to these here. And so there's no musicians, no craftsmen, no mills, no lights, so on and so forth. This great city is going to grow quiet. Well, in her is the blood of all of those who have been slain by the earth. And so now what we see happening is they're paying now for the blood that is on their hands. There's one more, but we're out of time. And so we will go ahead and we'll cover this, Lord willing, next week or whenever. I say next week, but I don't know if I'll be on next week or not. I think I will be, but I'm not sure. I appreciate you all being here. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you to everybody who tuned in today. Lord willing, we'll be back at this soon again. Hopefully next week. I think I can be back. Next time. Thanks again for being here. And thank you, Reba. And thank you also, CJ. And hope to be back with you again soon. Thanks for tuning in.